My parents secretly withdrew my medical school application to protect my sister's feelings, so I cut them off, and now my grandparents changed their wills to leave everything to me instead of them. I, 18M, just discovered something that completely changed how I see my family. This happened 3 months ago, but I'm still trying to process everything. My parents Ezra, 52M, and Camilla, 49F, my younger sister Hazel, 16F, and me. We live in a small town in Ohio where everyone knows everyone else's business. My dad works as a manager at the local bank and my mom teaches elementary school. They've always been obsessed with appearances and what the neighbors think. Hazel and I have always been different. She's the social butterfly who cares more about her Instagram followers than her grades. She barely maintains a C average and spends most of her time shopping or hanging out with friends. Meanwhile, I've been focused on academics since middle school. I maintained a 4.0 GPA throughout high school, was president of the science club, volunteered at the local hospital for 3 years, and shadowed doctors whenever possible. The problem started during my junior year when Hazel's grades began slipping even more. She was failing chemistry and struggling in math. Instead of addressing her study habits, my parents immediately assumed she had a learning disability. They took her to 3 different specialists over 6 months. Each one said the same thing: Hazel was perfectly capable but wasn't applying herself. My parents refused to accept this. During this time, my college counselor Mrs. Patterson called a meeting with my parents to discuss my applications. I had already decided I wanted to become a doctor and was planning to apply to several pre-med programs. Mrs. Patterson was excited about my prospects and mentioned that with my stats, I should consider applying to some top-tier schools. That's when things got weird. My parents seemed uncomfortable with the conversation. My dad kept asking about state schools and community colleges. When Mrs. Patterson mentioned that students like me often get into prestigious programs, my mom changed the subject to Hazel's struggles. After the meeting, my parents sat me down for what they called a family discussion. They said they were worried about Hazel's self-esteem. My dad explained that having a brother who was too successful might make Hazel feel inadequate. My mom added that maybe I should consider staying closer to home for college so Hazel wouldn't feel abandoned. I didn't understand their logic then. I thought they were just being overprotective of Hazel like they always were. Since she was little, Hazel never faced consequences for anything. When she broke my science fair project in 8th grade, they bought her a new dress instead of making her apologize. When she crashed my dad's car last year, they blamed the weather conditions and got her a newer car. Despite their concerns, I went ahead with my college applications. I applied to 15 schools including Ohio State, Case Western, University of Cincinnati, and several others. I also decided to take a chance and apply to Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. Johns Hopkins has one of the best pre-med programs in the country. My science teacher Mr. Rodriguez encouraged me to apply there after I won the Regional Science Olympiad. The application process was intense. I spent weeks perfecting my essays, gathering recommendation letters, and preparing for interviews. The Johns Hopkins application was particularly demanding. I wrote 5 different essays, submitted my research project on antibiotic resistance that I'd worked on for 2 years, and even traveled to Baltimore for an alumni interview in December. My parents seemed supportive during this process, or so I thought. My mom helped me organize my application materials and my dad even drove me to the Johns Hopkins interview. They asked questions about deadlines and requirements. I thought they had accepted my ambitions. By February, I started receiving responses from colleges. Ohio State accepted me with a partial scholarship. Case Western offered me a spot in their honors program. University of Cincinnati accepted me into their pre-med track. Every week brought good news from another school. But Johns Hopkins remained silent. I checked my email constantly. I logged into their admissions portal every few days. My status just showed that my application was under review. March came and went. Other students in my school were getting their Hopkins responses, both acceptances and rejections. I got nothing. By early April, I became concerned. Hopkins typically sends all decisions by the end of March. I called their admissions office to check on my application status. The woman on the phone asked for my application ID and put me on hold for several minutes. When she came back, she sounded confused. She told me that their records showed my application had been withdrawn in January, just 2 weeks after the deadline. She said they had received an email from my account requesting the withdrawal and thanking them for their consideration. I told her I never sent that email. She put me on hold again and came back with more details. The withdrawal email had come from my personal email address at 2:17 a.m. on January 18th. It included my full name, application ID, and social security number. She forwarded me a copy of the email. The email was professionally written and polite. It said I had decided to focus on schools closer to home for family reasons. It thanked the admissions committee for their time and requested that my application be withdrawn from consideration. The email signature included my phone number and address, information that was on my original application. I stared at that email for an hour. I never wrote it. I was asleep at 2:17 a.m. on January 18th. That was a school night and I always went to bed by 11 p.m. during the week. I also never would have withdrawn my Hopkins application. It was my dream school. Someone had accessed my email account and sent that withdrawal request. The only people who knew my application ID and had access to my personal information were my family members. I immediately suspected Hazel. She had always been jealous of my academic success. Last year, she deleted my college prep notes from my laptop during finals week. She claimed it was an accident, but I knew better. She also had access to my email password because I used to check my accounts on the family computer. I confronted Hazel in her room after school. I showed her the withdrawal email on my phone and asked if she had sent it. She looked genuinely confused at first. She read the email twice and then her expression changed to something I had never seen before. She started yelling at me. She said that if she had wanted to sabotage my college applications, she would have withdrawn all of them, not just Hopkins. She said I didn't deserve to go to a fancy school anyway because I was an arrogant know-it-all. She threw my phone back at me and told me to get out of her room. Her reaction told me she didn't send the email. Hazel isn't good at hiding things and she would have bragged about it if she had done it. But her words stung more than I expected. The hatred in her voice was real. I started yelling back at her. I called her lazy and said she was jealous because she couldn't get into any decent college with her grades. She threw a book at me and I grabbed her arm. We ended up in a physical fight, something that had never happened before. My parents heard the commotion and came running upstairs. My dad pulled me off Hazel while my mom helped her up. Hazel was crying and had a small scratch on her face from where she fell. My parents demanded to know what was happening. I showed them the withdrawal email. I explained that someone had sabotaged my Hopkins application. I accused Hazel first, but she denied it while sobbing. My parents looked at each other with an expression I couldn't read. That's when my mom broke down. She sat on Hazel's bed and put her face in her hands. She started crying and kept saying she was sorry. My dad stood there looking defeated. My mom finally looked up at me and admitted they had sent the withdrawal email. She said they had access to my email account because I used my dad's laptop for school projects and never logged out. They knew my application ID from the confirmation emails Hopkins had sent me. They explained their reasoning. They said Hazel had been struggling with depression since my junior year. They claimed that having a brother who got into a prestigious school like Johns Hopkins would have destroyed Hazel's self-worth completely. They said they had to protect her mental health. My dad added that they thought I would be fine because I had gotten into several good schools already. He said Ohio State was perfectly respectable and I could still become a doctor. They acted like they had made a reasonable sacrifice for the good of the family. I couldn't process what they were telling me. My parents had deliberately sabotaged my future to protect Hazel's feelings. They had stolen an opportunity I had worked for years to earn. They had lied to my face for months while I wondered what had happened to my application. I walked out of Hazel's room without saying anything. I went to my bedroom and started packing my clothes into a duffel bag. My parents followed me and kept trying to explain their decision. My mom said they would help me succeed at whichever school I chose. My dad offered to pay for medical school when the time came. I ignored them completely. I called my Uncle Steve, my dad's older brother who lives about an hour away. I asked if I could stay with him for a while. He said yes without asking any questions, which told me he probably knew something was wrong. I called a taxi and waited on the front porch with my bag. My parents stood in the doorway trying to talk to me. Hazel watched from her bedroom window. I didn't respond to anything they said. When the taxi arrived, I got in and left. Uncle Steve and Aunt Victoria, 48F, were waiting for me when I arrived. Uncle Steve had already set up their guest room. They asked me what happened and I told them the whole story. Uncle Steve got quiet and then made some phone calls. The next morning, both sets of my grandparents arrived at Uncle Steve's house. My dad's parents, Grandma Helen, 74F, and Grandpa Robert, 76M, live about 30 minutes away. My mom's parents, Grandma Joyce, 71F, and Grandpa William, 73F, drove down from Cleveland. They had already heard the story from Uncle Steve. All four of them were furious with my parents. They spent 2 hours discussing the situation while I sat there mostly listening. By the end of the meeting, they had made two major decisions. First, they would collectively pay for my college tuition and living expenses. They had been saving money to help with my education anyway, and now they wanted to make sure I didn't need anything from my parents. Second, They were going to contact their lawyers about changing their wills. They had planned to leave their estates to their children, but now they wanted to make me the primary beneficiary instead. Grandpa Robert said my parents had shown they couldn't be trusted with family responsibilities. The grandparents left that afternoon after making their plans clear. Uncle Steve said I could stay with them as long as I needed. Aunt Victoria had already started looking into transferring my high school transcripts so I could finish senior year at the local school. That evening, my phone started ringing. My parents called me 15 times in 3 hours. I finally answered on the 16th call. My mom immediately started yelling at me. She said I had ruined their relationship with the grandparents by tattling. She demanded that I call all 4 grandparents and tell them I had made up the story about the withdrawn application. My dad got on the phone and said I was being manipulative and selfish. He said Hazel was now even more depressed because she felt responsible for the family problems. He ordered me to come home immediately and fix the situation. I listened to them vent for about 5 minutes. Then I started laughing. I told them they had created this mess themselves and now they had to live with the consequences. I said I was glad the grandparents saw them for who they really were. I mentioned that my college was now paid for and I didn't need them for anything. I also told them that when they were old and needed help, they could call Hazel since she was clearly their priority. I said I would be happy to recommend some nice nursing homes for them to consider. Then I hung up and blocked both their numbers. I know some people might think I was too harsh with that phone call. But I had spent months wondering what was wrong with my Hopkins application. I had blamed myself for not being good enough. The whole time, my own parents were hiding the fact that they had sabotaged me. I'm currently finishing my senior year at Uncle Steve's local high school. I've decided to attend Case Western in the fall. It's not Johns Hopkins, but it's still an excellent school with a good pre-med program. My grades are still strong and I'm looking forward to starting fresh. My parents have tried reaching out through relatives, but I haven't responded to any of their attempts. Hazel sent me a text message last month apologizing, but I didn't reply to that either. I don't see any point in maintaining relationships with people who thought it was acceptable to sabotage my future. The grandparents have followed through on their promises. They've met with lawyers and updated their wills. They've also set up education accounts to cover my medical school expenses when the time comes. I don't regret leaving or cutting contact with my parents. They made their choice when they decided Hazel's feelings were more important than my opportunities. Now they have to live with the consequences of that choice. Update 1: A lot has happened since my original post. I thought people might want to know how things have developed. I've been living with Uncle Steve and Aunt Victoria for about 4 months now. They've been incredible. Aunt Victoria helped me finish my college applications for transfer students, and Uncle Steve has been teaching me things my dad never bothered with, like changing oil and basic home repairs. The high school situation went smoother than expected. The guidance counselor at my new school, Mrs. Kim, reviewed my transcript and placed me in appropriate classes. I'm actually ahead in most subjects, so I've been helping tutor some younger students in chemistry and physics. It feels good to use my knowledge to help others succeed instead of hiding it to protect someone's feelings. Case Western confirmed my acceptance and financial aid package. Between the academic scholarships I earned and my grandparents' contribution, I won't have any student debt. I've also been accepted into their pre-med advising program, which provides mentorship and research opportunities starting freshman year. But the main reason I'm writing this update is because of what happened 3 weeks ago. My cousin Jake, 19M, goes to Ohio State. He's my Uncle Mike's son from my mom's side of the family. Jake and I weren't particularly close before, but we've been texting more since I moved in with Uncle Steve. Jake called me on a Tuesday night and said he had some information I needed to know. He sounded serious, so I asked him to explain. Apparently, my parents had been telling relatives a completely different version of events. According to their story, I had gotten rejected from Johns Hopkins and became so upset that I ran away from home. They claimed I was lying about them withdrawing my application because I couldn't handle the rejection. Jake said most of the family had believed this story initially. My parents had always been seen as responsible and level-headed, while I was just a teenager who might exaggerate things. But Jake became suspicious when he talked to Hazel at a family gathering 2 weeks ago. Hazel apparently broke down crying when Jake mentioned my situation. She told him the truth about what really happened. She admitted that our parents had withdrawn my Hopkins application and that I had every right to be upset with them. But Hazel revealed something else that I hadn't known. She said our parents had been monitoring my email account for over a year, not just accessing it occasionally when I used Dad's laptop. They had been reading all my college correspondence, including emails from admission counselors and scholarship notifications. Hazel told Jake that our parents had deleted several emails from colleges that had offered me additional scholarships or honors programs. They wanted to limit my options to schools they considered acceptable. Hopkins was just the most extreme example of their interference. Jake was shocked by this information. He started asking other relatives what they knew about the situation. That's when he discovered that Grandpa Robert had shown some family members the withdrawn application email as proof of what my parents had done. The family is now split into two camps. My grandparents, Uncle Steve, Aunt Victoria, and several cousins believe my version of events and support my decision to cut contact with my parents. But my Aunt Linda, my mom's sister, and a few other relatives still think I'm overreacting and should reconcile with my parents. Jake also told me that my parents have been struggling financially since the grandparents changed their wills. Apparently, they had been counting on inheritance money to pay off some debts and fund Hazel's college education. Now they're looking at taking out loans for everything. Hazel's college prospects have become a major issue. With her grades, she can only get into community college or very low-tier state schools. My parents have been pressuring relatives to write recommendation letters for her, but most family members are staying out of it. The most disturbing thing Jake told me was about Hazel's current situation. She's apparently been acting out more at school and at home. She got suspended last month for skipping classes, and she's been getting into arguments with teachers. My parents have been blaming me for her behavior, saying that my absence has traumatized her. But Hazel told Jake something different during their conversation. She said she feels guilty about what our parents did to me, but she also resents that everyone now sees her as the reason I left. She's caught in the middle of a situation our parents created, and she doesn't know how to handle it. Part of me feels bad for Hazel. She didn't ask our parents to sabotage my applications. But I also remember the hatred in her voice when she said I didn't deserve to go to a good school. I'm not sure if her current guilt is genuine or just a reaction to the family drama. My parents have been trying different approaches to get me to come back. 2 weeks ago, they showed up at Uncle Steve's house unannounced. Uncle Steve answered the door and told them I didn't want to see them. My dad tried to push past him, but Uncle Steve is a big guy and blocked the entrance. My mom started crying on the front porch and begging Uncle Steve to let them talk to me. She said they had made a mistake and wanted to make things right. Uncle Steve told them they should have thought about that before they sabotaged their son's future. They stayed on the porch for about 20 minutes, alternating between apologies and demands that I speak with them. Finally, Uncle Steve threatened to call the police, and they left. Last week, they tried a different approach. My dad called Uncle Steve's work phone and claimed there was a family emergency that required me to come home immediately. Uncle Steve called me to check, and when he realized it was a lie, he told my dad never to contact him at work again. I've been thinking about whether I should reach out to Hazel directly. Jake thinks she might be willing to have an honest conversation without our parents interfering. But I'm not sure what good it would do. Hazel and I were never close, and our parents' actions have created even more distance between us. The other development is that I've started getting calls from Johns Hopkins. Apparently, someone from their admissions office reviewed my file and noticed some irregularities with my withdrawal. They called to confirm that I had actually requested to withdraw my application. I explained the situation to them, and they were very understanding. The admissions counselor said they occasionally see cases where family members interfere with applications. She offered to review my application for next year's entering class if I was interested in reapplying. I told her I was committed to Case Western now, but I appreciated the offer. It was validating to know that Hopkins would have seriously considered my application if my parents hadn't interfered. I've also been meeting with a college counselor at my new high school to plan my pre-med track. She's helped me identify research opportunities and volunteer positions that will strengthen my medical school applications. It's nice to work with someone who supports my goals instead of trying to limit them. Uncle Steve and Aunt Victoria have been great about giving me space to figure things out. They don't pressure me to reconcile with my parents, but they also don't badmouth them constantly. They've created a stable environment where I can focus on finishing high school and preparing for college. I graduate in 6 weeks. My grandparents are planning to attend the ceremony, but my parents won't be there. It's strange to think about reaching this milestone without them, but I've realized that their presence would probably cause more stress than joy. I'm looking forward to starting college in the fall. Case Western has a strong pre-med program, and I've already connected with some current students who've been helpful with course planning. I feel like I'm finally moving forward instead of being held back by family drama. Some people have asked me if I ever plan to forgive my parents. I don't know the answer to that question yet. Forgiveness might be possible someday, but rebuilding trust would take a lot of work on their part. They would need to acknowledge the full extent of what they did and show genuine commitment to change. Based on their behavior over the past few months, I don't think they're there yet. They're still focused on getting me to come back rather than understanding why I left. Until that changes, I don't see any point in trying to repair our relationship. For now, I'm focused on my own future and the family members who have supported me through this situation. I'm grateful to have people in my life who believe in my potential instead of trying to diminish it. Update 2: I need to share what happened last month because it changes everything. I thought I knew about this situation. I started college at Case Western in August. The transition has been smooth, and I'm enjoying my classes. I'm taking general chemistry, calculus, biology, and a writing seminar. My professors are excellent, and I've already joined a research lab that studies bacterial resistance mechanisms. My roommate is a guy named Tyler from Michigan who's also pre-med. We get along well and study together most evenings. Having a normal college experience has helped me realize how dysfunctional my home situation really was. But 3 weeks ago, I got a call that shattered everything I believed about my family. Hazel called me directly. She had gotten my number from Jake. She was crying and could barely speak. She kept saying she needed to tell me something important and asking if we could meet in person. I was hesitant because I hadn't spoken to Hazel since the day I left home. But she sounded genuinely distressed, so I agreed to meet her halfway between Cleveland and my college. We met at a coffee shop in Akron on a Saturday afternoon. Hazel looked terrible. She had lost weight and had dark circles under her eyes. She ordered a coffee but didn't drink it. She just sat there fidgeting with the cup while trying to find words. Finally, she started talking. She told me she had been keeping a secret for over a year, and the guilt was destroying her ability to function. She said our parents had made her promise never to tell anyone, but she couldn't live with it anymore. The truth was much worse than I had imagined. Hazel revealed that she had actually been involved in sabotaging my college applications, but not in the way I had suspected. She hadn't deleted my Hopkins application herself. Instead, she had been feeding our parents information about my college plans for months. She explained that our parents had asked her to report back to them about my conversations with friends, my emails that she saw on the family computer, and my college visits. They told her they needed to monitor my activities to make sure I wasn't making decisions that would hurt the family. Hazel said she initially thought they were just being protective. But as time went on, their requests became more specific. They asked her to note which schools I seemed most excited about, which admission counselors I had contacted, and what my backup plans were. The worst part was that Hazel had access to my phone and laptop more often than I realized. She had figured out my passwords and had been reading my text messages and emails. She knew about my Hopkins application before I even told our parents about it. Hazel told our parents that Hopkins was my dream school and that getting accepted there would mean everything to me. She shared details about my essays and my interview preparation. She even told them about the research project I had submitted with my application. Our parents used this information to craft the withdrawal email. Hazel said they spent days writing and rewriting it to make sure it sounded like something I would have written. They included specific details that only someone who had read my original application would know. But Hazel revealed something even more disturbing. She said our parents had been planning to sabotage my college application since my sophomore year of high school. They were afraid that if I got into a top-tier school, other families in town would compare their children to me, and Hazel would look bad by comparison. They had convinced Hazel that helping them was the right thing to do for family unity. They told her that my academic success was creating an unhealthy dynamic in our household and that limiting my options would be better for everyone in the long run. Hazel said she started having doubts about their plan during my senior year, but she felt trapped. Our parents had made her complicit in their scheme, and she was afraid that if the truth came out, I would hate her forever. After I left home, Hazel said the guilt became unbearable. She started having panic attacks and couldn't sleep. She began failing classes and getting into trouble at school. Our parents kept telling her that my behavior was the problem, but she knew the truth. The breaking point came when our parents started pressuring her to contact me and convince me to come home. They wanted her to apologize on their behalf and tell me that she missed having me around. Hazel realized they were trying to use her to manipulate me, just like they had used her to sabotage my applications. Hazel begged me to forgive her. She said she understood if I never wanted to see her again, but she couldn't keep living with the secret. She offered to tell our grandparents and Uncle Steve exactly what had happened, including her role in the sabotage. I sat there trying to process what she had told me. The betrayal was even deeper than I had realized. It wasn't just my parents who had worked against me, Hazel had been actively helping them for months. But I could also see that Hazel was genuinely remorseful. She was destroying her own mental health by carrying this guilt. She had finally found the courage to tell me the truth, knowing that it would probably end our relationship permanently. I asked Hazel why she was telling me this now. She said she couldn't start her senior year knowing what she had done to me. She also said she was afraid our parents might try to sabotage other aspects of my life if I ever tried to reconcile with them. Hazel told me that our parents had been monitoring my social media accounts and asking relatives for information about my college experience. They knew I was doing well at Case Western, and they were already talking about ways to interfere with my medical school applications when the time came. This information made me realize that cutting contact with my parents wasn't enough. As long as they had access to information about my life through relatives and social media, they could continue to sabotage my future. I thanked Hazel for telling me the truth. I told her I needed time to process everything she had shared. I said I couldn't promise that our relationship could be repaired, but I was grateful that she had finally been honest with me. Hazel asked if I was going to tell our grandparents and Uncle Steve about her involvement. I told her that was her decision to make. If she wanted to come clean to the family, I would support her. But if she wasn't ready for that step, I wouldn't force her. After Hazel left, I drove back to college and spent the next few days thinking about what to do with this information. I realized I needed to take additional steps to protect myself from my parents' interference. First, I changed all my passwords and security questions. I also set up two-factor authentication on all my important accounts. I created a new email address that only my grandparents and Uncle Steve know about. Second, I contacted the college counseling services to document what had happened with my high school applications. I wanted to have an official record in case my parents tried to interfere with my medical school applications in the future. Third, I limited my social media presence and changed my privacy settings. I also asked my friends not to share information about my academic progress with anyone outside our immediate circle. Most importantly, I called my grandparents and Uncle Steve to warn them about my parents' continued monitoring. I didn't tell them about Hazel's confession yet, but I explained that my parents might try to get information about me through family members. Grandpa Robert was furious when I told him about the ongoing surveillance. He said he would make it clear to the extended family that no one should share information about me with my parents. He also suggested that we should consider legal action if the harassment continued. Uncle Steve offered to help me change my phone number and set up a P.O. box for my mail. He said he had been suspicious about some of the questions relatives had been asking about my college experience. The hardest part of this update is realizing how naive I was about my family dynamics. I thought Hazel was just a typical jealous sibling, but she had been actively working against me for over a year. I thought my parents' sabotage was a desperate last-minute decision, but they had been planning it for years. I'm still processing the emotional impact of Hazel's confession. Part of me is glad she finally told the truth, but another part of me is devastated by the depth of the betrayal. It's one thing to discover that your parents sabotaged you, it's another thing to learn that your sister helped them do it. I haven't decided whether I want to maintain any relationship with Hazel going forward. She's still a minor living with our parents, and I worry that they might retaliate against her if they discover she told me the truth. But I also don't know if I can trust her after what she did. For now, I'm focused on protecting myself and continuing to build my new life at college. I've made good friends here who support my goals and don't try to undermine my success. I'm doing well academically and have already started planning for medical school applications. I'm also grateful for the family members who have stood by me throughout this situation. My grandparents and Uncle Steve have created a support system that my parents failed to provide. They've shown me what healthy family relationships look like. I know some people might think I should give Hazel another chance since she's still young and was manipulated by our parents. I'm not ruling that out completely, but rebuilding trust will take time. She participated in sabotaging my future, even if she was pressured into it. The most important thing I've learned from this experience is that I can't rely on my parents to support my goals and dreams. They've shown repeatedly that they're willing to harm my future to protect their own interests. I need to build my own life independent of their influence. I'm planning to spend Thanksgiving with Uncle Steve and Aunt Victoria instead of going home. My grandparents will be there too, so it will be a good opportunity to discuss how to handle my parents' ongoing interference. I want to make sure they can't sabotage my medical school applications or any other opportunities that come my way. Update 3: This will be my final update because the situation has reached a resolution of sorts. Not the kind of happy ending some people might want, but a realistic conclusion based on the circumstances. After my last update, Hazel decided to tell our grandparents and Uncle Steve about her role in sabotaging my applications. She called Grandpa Robert first and asked if she could meet with him privately. She confessed everything she had told me and provided additional details about our parents' long-term planning. Grandpa Robert was shocked by the extent of the deception. He had known our parents were controlling, but he hadn't realized how calculated their sabotage had been. He arranged a meeting with all 4 grandparents and Uncle Steve to discuss Hazel's revelations. Hazel attended that meeting and repeated her confession in front of everyone. She brought printed copies of text messages between her and our parents that showed the scope of their monitoring. She also provided screenshots of my emails and social media posts that she had forwarded to them over the months. The evidence was overwhelming. Our parents hadn't just made an impulsive decision to withdraw my Hopkins application. They had been systematically gathering intelligence about my college plans and using Hazel as their primary source. After reviewing all the information, my grandparents made a final decision about their relationship with my parents. They announced that they were cutting all financial and emotional support immediately. They also hired a lawyer to send a formal cease and desist letter demanding that my parents stop monitoring my activities and contacting relatives for information about me. The grandparents also established a trust fund for Hazel's college education, separate from anything our parents might plan. They made it clear that this support was contingent on Hazel maintaining distance from our parents' manipulative behavior and focusing on her own academic improvement. Hazel has been living with Grandma Helen and Grandpa Robert since October. She transferred to a new high school where she doesn't have to deal with the social drama from our hometown. Her grades have improved significantly, and she's been seeing a counselor to help her process the family situation. Our parents' reaction to these developments was predictable. They blamed me for turning the family against them. My dad called Uncle Steve and accused me of being vindictive and manipulative. My mom sent a long email to all the relatives claiming that Hazel had been brainwashed into making false accusations. But their attempts to control the narrative failed. Too many family members had seen the evidence of their sabotage and monitoring. The text messages Hazel provided were particularly damning because they showed our parents coaching her on what information to gather and how to access my private communications. In November, my parents made one final attempt to regain control of the situation. They drove to Case Western and showed up at my dormitory unannounced. They demanded that security let them into the building so they could speak with me. The resident advisor called campus security when my parents became agitated about being denied access. I was in class at the time, so I didn't know about the incident until later that evening. When I returned to my dorm, Tyler told me what had happened. He had been studying in the common area when my parents arrived and had overheard their conversation with security. He said they seemed desperate and kept insisting that they had a right to see their son. Campus security had handled the situation professionally. They explained that students have the right to refuse visitors, even family members. When my parents wouldn't leave voluntarily, security escorted them off campus property and filed a report about the incident. I contacted campus security the next day and formally requested that my parents be banned from university property. I provided documentation about their history of harassment and sabotage. The security director assured me that they would notify local police if my parents returned to campus. I also spoke with my academic advisor about the situation. She helped me set up additional privacy protections for my academic records and recommended that I document all harassment attempts in case legal action became necessary. The campus incident seems to have been my parents' last desperate move. Since then, they haven't attempted to contact me directly or shown up anywhere I might be. I think they finally realized that their behavior was creating legal consequences they couldn't ignore. Hazel and I have had several conversations over the past few months. She's working hard to rebuild trust and has been completely transparent about her communications with our parents. She's also been attending counseling to address the guilt and manipulation she experienced. I've decided to maintain a limited relationship with Hazel going forward. She was manipulated by our parents, but she also made choices that hurt me. I'm willing to give her a chance to prove that she's changed, but I won't pretend that everything is fine between us. Hazel understands my position and hasn't pressured me to forgive her completely. She's focused on improving her own life and preparing for college. She's been accepted to several universities and plans to study psychology, partly because of her experiences with our family dynamics. I'm finishing my freshman year at Case Western with a 3.8 GPA. I've been accepted into a competitive summer research program that will strengthen my medical school applications. I've also made close friends who come from healthy families, which has helped me understand what normal family relationships look like. My relationship with my grandparents and Uncle Steve remains strong. They've continued to provide emotional and financial support without trying to control my decisions. They ask about my classes and activities because they're genuinely interested in my success, not because they want to monitor or limit me. The financial consequences for my parents have been significant. Without the expected inheritance money, they've had to take out substantial loans to cover Hazel's college expenses and their own debts. My dad had to take a second job at a hardware store, and my mom has been tutoring students after school for extra income. I heard through relatives that they've been trying to reconcile with the grandparents, but their efforts have been unsuccessful. The grandparents made it clear that any relationship would require genuine acknowledgement of what they did and a commitment to respecting my autonomy going forward. My parents haven't met those conditions. From what I understand, they still maintain that their actions were justified to protect Hazel's self-esteem. They've portrayed themselves as victims of my vindictiveness rather than taking responsibility for their choices. I've had time to reflect on everything that happened, and I've reached some conclusions about my family and my future. My parents taught me an important lesson about trust and boundaries, though not the lesson they intended. They showed me that some people will sabotage your dreams if those dreams threaten their comfort or control. I've also learned that biological family isn't the only family that matters. My grandparents, Uncle Steve, Aunt Victoria, and even some of my college friends have provided more genuine support than my parents ever did. They've celebrated my successes instead of trying to diminish them. I don't spend much time thinking about whether I'll ever reconcile with my parents. That would require them to fundamentally change their approach to family relationships, and I don't see evidence that they're capable of that kind of growth. They're more concerned with being right than with repairing the damage they've caused. For now, I'm focused on my own goals and the people who support them. I'm planning to apply to medical schools in 3 years, and I'm confident that I'll have the academic record and experiences necessary to get accepted to excellent programs. I'm also planning to specialize in a field where I can help people who've experienced family trauma or manipulation. My experiences have given me insight into how family dynamics can affect someone's mental health and future prospects. I want to use that understanding to help others who face similar challenges. Some people have asked me if I regret how I handled this situation. I don't. My parents made deliberate choices to sabotage my future, and they involved Hazel in their scheme. The consequences they're experiencing are the natural result of their actions, not punishment I imposed on them. I gave them multiple opportunities to be honest about what they had done. Instead, they continued to lie and manipulate. They even tried to use Hazel to draw me back into their dysfunction. They created this situation, and they're responsible for the outcome. I'm grateful that I discovered their sabotage when I did. If I had remained unaware of their interference, they might have continued to undermine my opportunities throughout college and medical school. Now I know to protect myself from their influence. The most important thing I've learned is that success isn't just about academic achievement. It's also about surrounding yourself with people who want you to succeed and removing people who don't. My parents failed that basic test of family loyalty, but other people in my life have passed it. I'm looking forward to my sophomore year and the opportunities it will bring. I've already been invited to continue my research project over the summer, and I'm considering studying abroad during my junior year. These are the kinds of experiences my parents would have tried to limit or control. Instead, I have family members who encourage me to take advantage of every opportunity that comes my way. They trust me to make good decisions and support me when I face challenges. That's what real family support looks like. I know this story doesn't have the kind of reconciliation ending that some people prefer. But not every family conflict can or should be resolved with forgiveness and second chances. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to build a new life with people who actually care about your well-being. My parents had 18 years to show me that they supported my goals and dreams. Instead, they spent years planning ways to sabotage my future. That's not the kind of behavior that deserves unlimited chances to improve. I'm at peace with my decision to maintain distance from them. I have a good life at college, strong relationships with supportive family members, and clear goals for my future. I don't need my parents' approval or presence to succeed. Hazel and I may develop a better relationship over time, especially as she continues to distance herself from our parents' influence. But that will depend on her continued commitment to honesty and growth. I won't accept manipulation or betrayal from anyone, regardless of our shared history. For anyone dealing with similar family situations, my advice is to trust your instincts about toxic behavior and prioritize your own well-being. Family relationships should enhance your life, not sabotage it. If people claim to love you while actively working against your best interests, their actions matter more than their words. You don't owe anyone unlimited forgiveness, especially when they haven't shown genuine remorse or commitment to change. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to create distance from people who consistently harm you, even if they're family members. I'm grateful for this experience because it taught me to value the people who genuinely support me and to recognize manipulation when I see it. These are lessons that will serve me well throughout my life, both personally and professionally. This chapter of my life is closed. I'm moving forward with the family members who have earned my trust and the friends who celebrate my successes. That's all the family I need.